November 19, 1942. The vast, frozen plains surrounding Stalingrad stretch under a steel-gray sky. The air is biting, each breath a cloud of frost in the teeth of the wind sweeping across the steppe. From the horizon, the distant rumble of artillery echoes faintly, a prelude that no one yet fully understands. Inside the cramped command tent of the German Sixth Army, the atmosphere is suffocating. Smoke curls from half-burned cigarettes. Maps clutter the tables, pins and chalk marks crisscrossing the projected front lines. Generals shuffle papers and mutter under their breaths, their boots scuffing the dirt floor. The smell of cold metal and unwashed bodies lingers, mixing with the acrid tang of fear and anticipation. At the center of it all, General Friedrich Paulus, commander of the Sixth Army, leans over a large map. His face is pale, etched with lines of exhaustion, his uniform rumpled from weeks of continuous operations. Around him, his staff officers report daily progress, supply lines, enemy sightings, the state of his men. There is a palpable confidence, a belief that the Russians, weakened and scattered, cannot mount a decisive offensive. Yet, unbeknownst to most in the tent, the Red Army has been planning a strike that will shake the foundations of the German war effort. Operation Uranus is set to begin, a pincer movement aimed not at the city itself, but at the flanks, weakly held by Romanian and Italian divisions. The Soviet forces are ready to encircle the Sixth Army in a maneuver that will soon render the Germans trapped in a nightmare of their own overextension. Outside, the cold wind bites through the canvas walls. Inside, time seems to slow. Radios click sporadically. Couriers rush in, delivering messages in haste. Paulus, ever meticulous, studies each report, unaware that the largest threat he has faced is about to erupt along the seemingly quiet steppe. And then, as the first reports of massed Soviet attacks begin to filter in, the room falls into tense silence. The generals exchange glances, unsure if the intelligence is reliable. Rumors of breakthroughs arrive in fragments. Villages falling, artillery barrages increasing, enemy armor advancing. Paulus straightens, voice calm but eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. Report everything. I want confirmation before I act. No one knows yet that by nightfall the Sixth Army will be encircled, its supply lines cut, and the confidence that has carried them through months of brutal combat will shatter. The question lingers in the smoky tent. How did they not see it coming? Summer 1942. The German High Command celebrates what appears to be an unstoppable advance. The Sixth Army, reinforced and confident, pushes relentlessly toward Stalingrad, the city on the Volga whose capture Hitler believes will secure the southern flank and cut Soviet supply lines. From the Führer's vantage in Berlin, victory seems inevitable, a demonstration of German military precision and the genius of blitzkrieg. Yet beneath the surface, cracks begin to appear. Paulus reports to Army Group B. Supply lines are stretched thin over hundreds of kilometers of open steppe. The weather, still warm in early autumn, will soon turn bitter, and the mud, Rasputitsa, has already slowed movement. The men suffer fatigue, trucks break down, ammunition lags behind the front. The command tent buzzes with minor complaints and requests, each one a subtle warning of vulnerability. Hitler, consumed by the drive to seize Stalingrad, ignores these warnings. He views the Soviet forces as scattered and demoralized remnants of a shattered army. The Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian allies hold the flanks, units less experienced, poorly equipped, and widely regarded by German officers as unreliable. Yet Hitler insists these positions are sufficient. Generals in the high command voice their concerns privately, citing the risk of overextension, but they are overruled. On the Soviet side, the Stavka under Stalin has quietly marshaled reserves. The Don Front and Southwestern Front coordinate a massive counteroffensive. Intelligence reports indicate that the German flanks are thinly held, ripe for encirclement. Soviet planners are patient and meticulous, studying supply depots, terrain features, and the timing of German movements. Their goal, not a frontal assault on the heavily defended city, but a pincer strike at the exposed flanks to trap the Sixth Army in a cauldron. By mid-November, German officers in Stalingrad grow uneasy. Reports from reconnaissance units suggest unusual troop concentrations and increased radio traffic among Soviet divisions. Yet many dismiss it as routine activity, underestimating Soviet operational planning. Within the German High Command, a quiet tension simmers. They are aware that the stakes are monumental, that failure here would risk a catastrophic collapse, yet no one fully grasps the scope of what is about to unfold. The convergence of hubris, overconfidence, and misjudgment sets the stage. As the first Soviet units begin their advance in the early hours of November 19th, the High Command faces a moment they will not fully comprehend until hours later. The carefully constructed illusion of control is about to fracture, and the reality of encirclement looms, silent, immense, and inescapable. November 19th, 1942. Dawn breaks over the steppe, the gray light revealing a desolate landscape marred by trenches and barbed wire. The first reports filter into the 6th Army headquarters, Soviet columns advancing on the flanks. Initially, the officers exchange cautious glances, unsure if these are probing attacks or the prelude to something larger. Paulus is summoned to a war room briefing. Maps stretch across tables, marked with unit positions, supply routes, and vulnerable sectors. Staff officers report large armored formations sighted near Kletskaya, Romanian defenses collapsing, artillery concentrations increasing. Paulus's voice remains calm, measured, yet a shadow passes over his face. He requests confirmation from multiple reconnaissance units. At Army Group B headquarters, Field Marshal von Weichs receives fragmented reports. He quickly convenes his senior staff. Ensure that 6th Army's flanks hold. We cannot afford any breakthrough. I want every division in position. Yet even as he speaks, the scale of the Soviet assault becomes clearer. Romanian lines are disintegrating, communication lines are severed, and the advance is faster than expected. Within the High Command in Berlin, Hitler is briefed in real time. His reaction is restrained, almost clinical. Paulus must hold. There can be no retreat. Stalingrad is essential. No compromises. Officers in the room sense his stubborn certainty, a dangerous confidence that blinds him to the unfolding disaster. Back in the 6th Army's command tent, tension escalates. Reports of villages falling, armored units bypassing frontline positions, and artillery pounding supply routes arrive in rapid succession. Paulus instructs, dispatch reinforcements to the southern sector, maintain order, do not panic. His tone is firm, but witnesses later recall the brief tremor in his hands, the tight clench of his jaw. By mid-morning, the realization begins to settle. The Soviet offensive is not a minor operation, it is an encirclement. Generals attempt to communicate with flanking divisions, but lines are jammed or cut. Desperation creeps into their voices. We cannot hold, the enemy is advancing on all sides, one officer reportedly says. The phrase hangs in the cold, smoke-filled tent, a whisper of doom. Paulus, acutely aware that the 6th Army is becoming trapped, convenes his staff. Options are weighed, but clarity is elusive. Hitler's orders are clear. No withdrawal. The men look to their commander for guidance, sensing the gravity of the situation. Outside, the wind howls across the open steppe, carrying with it the first tremors of what will become one of history's most infamous encirclements. The German High Command faces a moment of brutal truth. Their front line is collapsing, their flanks evaporating, and yet the command structure demands unwavering obedience. For the first time, the illusion of control fractures, replaced by a dawning horror that this battle will not be won through strategy alone. By late morning, November 19th, the full scope of the Soviet offensive is undeniable. Reports flood into 6th Army headquarters. Romanian units on both flanks are retreating in disarray, supply convoys are intercepted or destroyed, and Soviet armor pushes relentlessly toward the rear. The tension inside the command tent is palpable. Officers move with brisk, anxious energy, but the decisions they need to make outpace the information they possess. Paulus convenes an urgent meeting. Maps are spread across the table, markers showing gaps in the lines that widen by the hour. "We are being encircled," he reportedly says, his voice steady but tight. Advisors suggest counterattacks, repositioning reserves, or attempting a breakout. Each option carries immense risk, yet Hitler's orders are unwavering. The Sixth Army must hold its ground. Commanders realize that the prospect of retreat is now both logistically and politically impossible. Communication with Army Group B is strained. Field Marshal von Weichs expresses concern. The situation on the flanks is deteriorating faster than anticipated. Reinforcements are limited. Paulus must hold, but relief is uncertain. The reality of overextension, ignored for months, has come crashing into stark clarity. Radios crackle with fragmented updates from the front lines. Some units cut off entirely, others holding isolated pockets under artillery fire. Panic simmers among junior officers, but outwardly discipline is maintained. Hitler, briefed in Berlin, maintains a tone of rigid control. No withdrawal. Sixth Army must stand. Relief will arrive. Yet privately, advisors warn that the Army's supply situation is critical, winter approaching, and encirclement a looming certainty. The High Command oscillates between disbelief and strategic calculation, attempting to reconcile Hitler's demands with the tactical reality. Within Stalingrad, the men of the Sixth Army begin to feel the first tangible effects: supply shortages, disrupted communications, and a relentless enemy advance that seems almost everywhere at once. Civilians and soldiers alike witness the harsh winter settling in, compounding the already desperate circumstances. Field hospitals fill, ammunition dwindles, and morale begins to falter. In the hours following the Soviet breakthrough, the chain reaction is unmistakable. Encirclement is no longer a theoretical danger. It is unfolding by the hour. Commanders scramble to adapt, yet their options are constrained by rigid orders, the collapse of Allied flanks, and the unforgiving terrain. The High Command faces a terrifying truth. The Sixth Army, once a symbol of German military prowess, is now trapped in a tightening noose, and the consequences will reverberate far beyond Stalingrad. The encirclement of the Sixth Army at Stalingrad marks a turning point not only for the Eastern Front, but for the entire trajectory of World War II. The consequences of Operation Uranus unfold in waves, reverberating through the German High Command and altering strategic calculations across the Wehrmacht. Within weeks, Paulus and his staff realized that relief efforts, Operation Winter Storm led by Field Marshal von Manstein, cannot penetrate the Soviet encirclement. Supplies dwindle, food, ammunition, and medical resources become critical. Letters from soldiers, intercepted and reported, describe frostbite, starvation, and exhaustion. High-ranking officers, previously confident in German invincibility, confront the stark reality: the war's tide is turning. Hitler's insistence on holding Stalingrad, once portrayed as unwavering leadership, becomes emblematic of strategic hubris. The High Command's adherence to rigid orders over adaptive strategy seals the Sixth Army's fate. Historian Antony Beevor notes that the encirclement demonstrates the perils of overconfidence and the danger of disregarding intelligence that contradicts the Führer's desires. Within Berlin, panic mixes with denial. Public broadcasts maintain a veneer of control, while private communications acknowledge impending disaster. The operational lessons are profound. Operation Uranus exposes the vulnerability of overstretched supply lines, the perils of leaving Allied flanks weakly defended, and the importance of intelligence interpretation. The German army's failure to anticipate a well-planned Soviet counteroffensive marks a fundamental misjudgment of both enemy capability and operational risk. Commanders across the Eastern Front begin reassessing strategies, yet the Sixth Army remains trapped, a stark warning for subsequent campaigns. On a human level, the encirclement leaves an indelible mark. Tens of thousands of soldiers face cold, hunger, and relentless attacks. The psychological impact on officers and men is profound. Diaries and memoirs reveal despair, fear, and the slow erosion of morale. For the German High Command, it becomes a symbol of failure not only in logistics and tactics, but in understanding the limits of command authority when faced with unforeseen strategic brilliance. For historians and military scholars, Operation Uranus remains a case study in operational planning and leadership under crisis. It illustrates how a combination of overconfidence, misjudgment, and rigid hierarchy can transform a tactical misstep into a strategic catastrophe. The encirclement at Stalingrad and the German High Command's responses define a moment where decisions, spoken, ordered, or ignored, shape the fate of an army and ultimately the course of the war. As the winter of 1942 deepens over the Volga, the frozen landscape becomes both a battlefield and a tomb for the Sixth Army. The encirclement is complete, supply lines severed, flanks shattered, and morale eroded. Yet in the cold, smoke-filled command tents, the German High Command continues to grapple with the consequences of their decisions. Reports circulate, orders are issued, and officers strive to maintain discipline. But the human cost of rigid command is unmistakable. Friedrich Paulus, once confident in his army's invincibility, faces the unbearable weight of responsibility. His measured voice belies the inner turmoil of a man confronting the collapse of a meticulously planned campaign. Around him, generals debate desperate countermeasures, but the harsh reality is unavoidable. The army is trapped, and the men under his command are slowly succumbing to hunger, cold, and relentless assault. The lessons of Operation Uranus extend far beyond the battlefield. They illuminate the tension between strategy and reality, the danger of hubris in leadership, and the profound human consequences of rigid obedience. The German High Command's words and actions in these critical hours reveal not only tactical miscalculations, but also the human frailty of those who must make life-and-death decisions under immense pressure. As history reflects on Stalingrad, it becomes clear that these moments, spoken, ordered, or ignored, resonate beyond military strategy. They are reminders that leadership is not only about authority and command, but also about foresight, adaptability, and the profound responsibility borne for human lives. In the frozen expanse of the Volga, the echoes of decisions made in smoke-filled tents endure, shaping the narrative of a war that would never be the same.